The wind whispered low through the junipers, carrying the scent of dry earth and pine needles. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk cried out, its voice echoing over the jagged canyons of Canyon Ridge Wilderness. The place was vast, raw, untouched, until recently. Beckett Shaw stood just outside the ranger station, a faded map in one hand, his other resting on the strap of his weathered field pack. His expression, like the land around him, was carved in stone. He didn't trust this assignment. The route was strange. Cutting through Devil's Spine, a region usually closed off due to unstable terrain. Even the map itself was suspect, hand-drawn, photocopied, the edges smudged with graphite and coffee stains. It wasn't the kind of thing the Bureau typically used, and Beckett knew it. But the directive came from Supervisor Wexley, and orders, even the quiet kind, carried weight. "You sure this is where he wants you?" Lena Alvarez leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. Her brown eyes narrowed at the map. Beckett didn't look up. "He says it's a new wildlife survey area, wants updated terrain notes." Lena exhaled slowly. "You believe that?" He rolled the map up. "I don't believe anything anymore, but I go where I'm told." She stepped forward, slipping a second map into his pack, crisp and folded properly. "Take mine too. It's up to date and it doesn't send you walking straight into a box canyon." He gave her a look, part thanks, part warning, but she ignored it and pressed a small device into his palm. A military-grade radio, low-band frequency. "Keep it on, channel 4, just in case." Beckett paused, then nodded. "Appreciated." He started toward the trail, the sun breaking through the clouds like a blade of fire. Lena called after him, "Beckett, watch your 6." He didn't respond, but his hand moved instinctively to the pistol at his hip. Old habits, hard to break. The hike took hours. Beckett moved like a shadow, silent and deliberate, eyes scanning everything. The bend of tree limbs, the scuff of a boot print half buried in dust, the unnatural quiet that settled over the forest. The deeper he went, the more it felt wrong. He passed what should have been an abandoned firewatch outpost, but found it barely standing, half charred with fresh tire marks nearby. Curiosity pulled at him, and despite protocol, he slipped inside. The floorboards creaked under his weight. Dust clung to the air like fog. Then he saw it, a trapdoor, slightly ajar, hidden beneath a moldy rug. Beckett crouched, heart steady, pulled it open. Underneath, crates, dozens of them, fuel drums, high-frequency radios, MREs with labels blacked out, some marked with military serial codes, others with none at all. One crate cracked open revealed compact rifles, still wrapped in oiled cloth. "What the hell is this?" he murmured, crouching lower to inspect a shipment label written in Cyrillic. He took out his phone to snap a few shots, no service, of course, then heard the sound. A rustle, then silence. Too quiet. Beckett stood and reached for his sidearm, but the floor beneath him shifted, then shattered. He fell through a trap deliberately placed beneath the rug. Something sharp cracked against his shoulder. The last thing he saw before blacking out was the beam above, and a length of rope dangling from it. When he came to, the world was upside down, literally. He was hanging, bound at the ankles, dangling over a gully like some twisted ornament. His head pounded. His left shoulder throbbed. Dislocated, maybe fractured. The air was cold now. Evening must have come while he was unconscious. Then came the voices. Two men, distant but moving closer. "Just leave him out here. Let the wolves take care of it." "We should have finished him. What if he radioed it in?" "He didn't. I jammed the channel. He's a ghost already." Footsteps crunched near the ridge. Beckett held his breath. They say he was Special Forces. You ever kill one of those? The other man snorted. They bleed like anyone else. Beckett stayed perfectly still. A buzzard circled overhead. His vision blurred. The rope creaked in the wind. Then silence again. They were gone. He twisted slowly, reaching for the hidden blade in his boot. Pain shot up his side as his shoulder protested, but he didn't stop. The blade nicked the rope. Once, twice. Then the last fiber snapped. Beckett crashed down into the dirt with a muffled grunt, the impact knocking the breath from his lungs. He rolled over, coughing, blood on his teeth. Everything spun. He couldn't stay here, not with wolves, not with those men. He tried to stand, his leg gave out, his arm useless. He began crawling, dirt and leaves scraping his cheek, toward the only shade he saw nearby, a thin line of trees. A place to disappear. The sun had dipped below the cliffs when a sound stirred nearby. Hoofbeats, software steady. Not hurried like a deer, not loud like a moose. Something in between. Beckett froze, hand reaching weakly for his pistol, when a shadow broke from the brush. A horse, number A Mustang, gray as smoke, mane tangled, eyes dark and intelligent. It stepped carefully, silently, like it belonged to the forest itself. The creature paused, nose flaring. Beckett stared. "You real?" The horse took another step, then stopped again. Its ears twitched. It stared at Beckett, not with fear, not with pity, but with recognition, like it had seen him before. The Mustang walked forward, slow and cautious. Beckett didn't move. Then it nudged his side, once, firm, before stepping back. Beckett couldn't help it. He laughed, weak and delirious. "You got a name?" The horse snorted, flicked its tail, and lowered its head again. For a moment, it almost looked like it was waiting. Rain came fast in the canyon, not with a whisper, but like a curtain pulled tight across the sky. Thunder cracked overhead as Beckett dragged himself under a low outcropping of rock, his body wrecked, soaked to the bone, and trembling from blood loss. His shoulder had swollen to the size of a melon. His lips were cracked. Every breath was a punishment. But he was alive. And the Mustang hadn't left. The ash-colored stallion stood just beyond the overhang, unmoving, watching the rain fall with the poise of a sentry. He had no saddle, no halter, nothing to tether him. Yet he stayed. Beckett eyed him, heart pounding, not from fear, but a creeping sense of recognition he couldn't shake. That color, that stance, it scraped against something buried deep. "Syria," he whispered, the name tasting like dust in his mouth. He'd seen that coat before, years ago. A military training compound outside Raqqa. A special breed of Mustang was brought in for desert recon. Smarter, faster, trained like soldiers. Beckett had ridden one for weeks during surveillance runs. Trusted it more than he'd trusted most of his own team. Then the compound was shelled. Horses scattered, some never found again. His vision blurred. "It can't be you." The stallion stepped forward slowly, lowering his head until it was level with Beckett's. He nudged the radio clipped to Beckett's vest. One Lena had slipped him hours before. The device buzzed faintly, struggling for signal. Then, unbelievably, the Mustang turned and began to walk away. Beckett's heart sank. "Wait." But the horse didn't go far. It stopped a few yards off, glancing back, waiting. That's when Beckett understood. It wasn't leaving, it was leading. Gritting his teeth, he forced himself to sit up. Every nerve screamed. He reached for the cut rope still tangled around his wrist and made a crude sling for his broken arm. With the remaining frayed length, he fashioned a loop and whispered, "You bolt, I'm dead." The stallion, Ash, he decided, stood still as Beckett looped the rope gently over his mane, careful not to spook him. Ash didn't flinch. When Beckett leaned forward, half collapsing across the horse's withers, Ash bent his front legs and knelt low. It wasn't instinct, it was training. Beckett's throat tightened. Damn, you really are one of them. With aching effort, he pulled himself onto the horse's back. Ash rose in one smooth motion, like lifting a ghost. Then he started moving. The path Ash took was not on any map. It weaved between gullies and slick rock, always staying just out of sight, always circling wide of areas Beckett suspected were watched. Once, they passed a narrow ridge where boot prints lined the mud, fresh military-issue soles. Beckett tensed, but Ash shifted his weight, dipped low, and carried them through the underbrush without a sound. It wasn't luck. Ash was avoiding detection. As the storm worsened, the forest blurred into shadows. At one point, Beckett slipped into unconsciousness, jolted awake only when Ash stopped abruptly and snorted. Before them was a sheer drop, a river gorged with rain, white and roaring. No way across, Beckett mumbled. But Ash turned sharply, took a side trail hidden by brush, and pushed on. Minutes later, they reached a narrow outcropping of stone, a land bridge barely 2 feet wide. Dangerous. Suicidal. Ash crossed without hesitation. On the other side, he climbed toward a rocky bluff and stopped outside a hollow Beckett hadn't noticed before. The mouth of a cave, shielded by low-hanging branches. Ash stepped aside, letting Beckett slide from his back. It wasn't graceful. Beckett hit the ground hard, gasping in pain, but they were dry, hidden, safe. The cave was shallow but warm. Old ashes in the back suggested someone had used it before. Maybe decades ago, maybe longer. Ash stood guard at the entrance. Beckett, half conscious, finally noticed the scar. A perfect triangle burned into the stallion's left shoulder. His heart dropped. He'd seen that scar before, branded in the fires of war. His team had marked each horse with that symbol to identify them during extraction. This wasn't just any Mustang. This was Echo. That was the name the military gave him. Beckett had whispered it during ops, trusted him to get in and out of live fire zones. Echo, he breathed. The stallion turned his head, as if in acknowledgement. Beckett laughed once, ragged, disbelieving. Hell, you found me again. He slipped into darkness shortly after, the sound of thunder fading, replaced by the steady rhythm of rain on stone and the quiet breath of a horse who remembered. Elsewhere, in the dull glow of fluorescent light, Lena Alvarez tapped the side of her radio, frowning. Static buzzed, then a flicker. Faint, garbled. A few short bursts of code. "Come on," she muttered, twisting the knob. She recognized the cadence. Military encryption. But scrambled. Broken. She reached for a notepad and began scribbling what she could catch. Long, short, short. Pause. Long, long. Then a pattern, then a word. Spine. Her blood ran cold. Devil's spine. Wexley had said Beckett was just doing a bird count, but now her gut told her what she'd feared since morning. Beckett wasn't lost. He was being hunted, and someone was trying very hard to make sure no one found him. She grabbed her jacket, checked the clip on her sidearm, and reached for the phone. No service. Of course. She opened the drawer and pulled out an old sat phone Beckett once kept in the emergency locker. Still had juice. Still had one number pre-programmed. Caleb Green, old hunter, Navajo tracker, and the only person who knew Devil's Spine better than God himself. She pressed dial. "It's Lena," she said when he picked up. "I need a favor, and bring the big rifle." Ash stood watch at the cave's edge all night, eyes never blinking, ears flicking at every sound. In the world of men, trust was hard to earn. In the world of horses, it was even harder. But Ash had chosen, and whatever came next, he wasn't running. Not this time. The sun had not yet risen when Lena Alvarez pulled her Jeep off the main forest road and onto a narrow dirt track that only old-timers like Caleb Green would call a trail. Pines scraped against the side mirrors. Her tires fishtailed in the mud as she climbed higher into the hills, praying the battered satellite phone still had enough battery to connect again if needed. In the passenger seat sat Caleb, silent as stone, with his lever-action rifle laid gently across his lap. His lined face showed no fear, just focus. The old Navajo had lived most of his life in Canyon Ridge, and when he heard Beckett might have gone missing near Devil's Spine, he'd only asked one question. Was he alone? Lena nodded. Caleb had grabbed his rifle and said, "Not anymore?" Back at the ranger station, Lena had tried to confront Wexley, but he'd brushed her off with a thin smile and a folder full of fabricated reports. Storm messed with the comms. "Nothing out of the ordinary," he'd said. "Beckett's a big boy. Probably hunkered down somewhere, waiting it out." But Lena had seen his eyes shift when she mentioned the word spine. Now, halfway up a ridge that few dared to climb, she turned to Caleb. "You sure you caught that signal right?" He didn't answer right away. Then it was Morse. Not perfect, but enough. Said spine, wounded, and something like Ash. Ring any bells? Lena blinked. Ash? Caleb nodded. Sounded like a call sign, or maybe a name. Lena gripped the wheel tighter. He had a horse with him. A wild one? Found him out there after the fires last year. Gray coat, real smart. Caleb grunted. Then we best hurry. Meanwhile, in the cave, Beckett stirred. Pain raked through his side. The fever had set in, infection. He could feel it now, his body burning from the inside out. Ash stood near the mouth of the cave, ears twitching, ever vigilant. Beckett reached for his radio. Static. He tapped the transmitter 3 times, paused, tapped twice more. Nothing. His vision blurred. The fever warped the walls around him. In the half-light, he thought he saw shadows of old comrades, smiles from another war. The way Echo, Ash, had stood in a sandstorm once, refusing to flinch as gunfire rang out across the desert. He muttered, "You remember too, don't you?" Ash turned his head slightly, just enough for Beckett to see that triangle-shaped scar again, burned clean through hair and hide. Suddenly, Ash's ears shot forward. A sound outside, low, heavy, movement. Beckett reached for the pistol strapped under his vest, only half-conscious, finger brushing the grip. Ash moved first. He stepped between Beckett and the entrance, body low, silent as fog. Then came the snap of a twig. Close. Ash snorted once, deep and guttural, and stomped. The figure emerged just as the first light of dawn bled across the trees. Lena. Ash lunged. She dropped to the ground instinctively, just as the stallion's hooves slashed inches above her head. "Whoa! Whoa! Easy!" Beckett rasped from behind. "Ash! Stand down!" Ash froze, mid-charge, hooves trembling with tension. Then, slowly, he backed off, though his eyes never left Lena. She lifted her head, heart pounding. "You weren't kidding about the horse." "Didn't think you'd find me," Beckett whispered. Caleb stepped into view behind her, rifle lowered but ready. "Found your tracks. You ain't subtle when you're bleeding." Lena dropped beside Beckett, checking his shoulder. "Damn it, you're septic. We have to get you out of here." "No," Beckett groaned. "Listen, there's something buried under the old ranger post near Sawmill Creek. Weapons, radios, oil drums." Lena froze. "You saw it?" "Yeah," Beckett said. and I wasn't supposed to. That's why they sent me out here with a phony map. Wexley's not working alone. He's part of something big." Lena exchanged a look with Caleb. "I tried to send a signal," Beckett said, blinking through sweat. "Might have been too late." "No," Lena replied. "I got it. We're not leaving you here." Ash stepped forward and nuzzled Beckett's neck. Gently, deliberately. Caleb studied the horse. "He's got a chip in his ear." "What?" Lena asked. Caleb crouched close and pulled out a small scanner he'd taken from his pack. "Military issue." The screen lit up. USMC Echo 7. Beckett stared, then laughed weakly. "Knew it." "You know this horse?" Caleb asked. "I did, overseas. We were both ghosts by the end." Lena stepped back. "So what now?" Beckett looked at Ash, then at her. "We finish what they tried to bury." Back at the ranger station, Wexley tapped his desk with a pen, staring at the blank monitor. The storm had knocked out the uplink, and Lena hadn't checked in for over 12 hours. He picked up the secure phone and dialed. "Status?" A cold voice answered. "The girl's off the grid. Shaw's presumed dead." Wexley's eyes narrowed. "I want confirmation." There was a pause. "We're sending men tonight." Wexley leaned back in his chair, gaze drifting toward the canyon outside. "Make it clean." And then, just for a second, he thought he heard something. A signal crackling through the static on the old ham radio by his desk. A voice. Just one word. "Ash." He paled, then turned the volume knob all the way down. Night fell once more over Canyon Ridge, but something had changed. Ash stood outside the cave, nose to the wind, muscles tight. He knew. The hunt wasn't over. It had only just begun. The first explosion shattered the silence like a shotgun blast through glass. Lena dropped to her knees, instinct kicking in as debris rained from the ceiling of the old Firewatch station. Dust filled her lungs. Caleb dove across the floor, yanking Beckett behind a steel storage cabinet as a second blast rocked the far end of the building. They were under attack. Through the cracks in the wooden wall, Lena saw silhouettes. 4, maybe 5 men, moving in formation. Black gear, no insignia, professional, hired guns. "They're torching the station," Caleb growled, peeking through his rifle scope. "They want the whole place gone. No evidence, no survivors." Beckett winced, gripping his still-healing shoulder. "They knew we'd come back." "Correction," Lena said, eyes steely. "They knew I would." A third explosion blew out the south wall. The night lit up with fire as the archive room went up in flames. And Ash, where was Ash? Outside, the stallion stood rigid beneath the burning haze. His flanks quivered, not from fear, but from memory. Sounds too familiar. Screams, fire, gunshots. He pawed the earth and turned toward the building just as a burning beam fell, blocking the rear entrance. Inside, Caleb shouted over the roar, "We need to move now. There's a root cellar out back, leads to the old mine tunnel." "Too late," Lena muttered. "They're surrounding the exits." Then Beckett's eyes lit up. The journal. "What?" she asked. "My brother's journal. It's in the trapdoor under the floorboards. He wrote everything. Wexley's meetings, dates, times, names. We need it." The flames were creeping closer. Lena dropped to the floor and jammed her knife between the slats. With a grunt, she pried the board loose. Underneath, a rusted lockbox. She grabbed it and shoved it into Beckett's arms. "Got it!" Then the roar of hooves. A shadow broke through the smoke. Ash. He charged straight through the side entrance, tail ablaze, a streak of silver fury. The mercenary near the front screamed as the stallion reared, hooves hammering the air. Ash struck him full in the chest. He went flying. "Go," Caleb barked. Ash whinnied loud and sharp, as if calling them. Beckett leaned on Lena and Caleb, limping through the firestorm as Ash circled back, herding the men forward, drawing attention. They slipped into the cellar just as bullets sprayed the wall behind them. The mine tunnel was pitch black. The walls dripped with moisture and the air reeked of soot and rot. Their flashlights flickered against the wet stone. Beckett stumbled, teeth clenched. "We can't leave him out there." "We won't," Lena said, "but we need that signal out." They reached a junction deep in the shaft, an old communications outpost from the Cold War era, still equipped with a weather-worn antenna and dusty console. Lena knelt and plugged in the radio Beckett had carried. Dead air. She twisted the frequency dial slowly. "Come on, come on." Static. Then a voice, faint, distant. "Delta 4, this is Echo 7. Repeat, Echo 7. Beckett's breath caught. Lena keyed the mic. "Echo 7, this is Alvarez. Ranger Shaw is injured, under attack. Request immediate extraction." No answer. She tried again. "This is Alvarez. Sending beacon now." She flipped a switch and the beacon began to pulse, riding on an old encrypted frequency, one only used by Marine recon units, back in the day. "You think anyone's still listening?" she asked. Beckett didn't answer. He just stared up through the shaft at the night sky, where smoke curled like ghosts. Outside, Ash had taken shelter behind the ridge. One leg burned, hide blistered and blackened. He didn't whimper. He didn't retreat. He waited. Two men advanced, weapons drawn. Ash charged again. This time, not to fight, but to draw them away. He led them across the ridge, weaving between rocks until one misstepped and tumbled down the slope. The other turned tail and ran. Ash, breathing hard, limped back toward the entrance, then collapsed. Smoke rose behind him. The fire had nearly consumed the station. Then, in the distance, rotors. A sound Beckett hadn't heard in years. 30 minutes later, 2 black helicopters descended into the clearing. Out stepped a man in tactical gear, early 40s with sharp eyes and a rough voice. He spotted Beckett emerging from the mine entrance, supported by Caleb and Lena, and nodded. "Thought you were dead, Shaw." Beckett blinked. "Ray Collins? You're FBI now?" "Task Force Veteran Unit. We monitor ghost frequency, just in case." Lena held out the lockbox. "Evidence, including names. Wexley's one of them." Ray took it. "We've been watching that snake for months. Couldn't get close." Now he smiled grimly. "Until tonight." Within minutes, agents were everywhere, securing the area, detaining 2 survivors from the Merc group, sweeping the fire zone. Ray turned to Beckett. "That horse, the one you signaled through?" Beckett nodded toward the far slope. "Ash." They found him near the tree line, unconscious but alive. Smoke curled from his coat, but his eyes fluttered open at Beckett's voice. Lena ran to him, dropping to her knees. "He stayed," she whispered, "even when the whole place burned." Ray looked at them both. "That's not just a horse," he said. "No," Beckett replied. "He's a soldier." Dawn came soft over the ridge, the flames now reduced to ash and embers. The forest was quiet again, but everything had changed. The fire hadn't destroyed the truth. It had set it free. The sun crept over Canyon Ridge, painting the mountains in golden light. For the first time in weeks, the air didn't smell like smoke or gunpowder. It smelled like pine, like rain-soaked earth, like survival. Beckett stood outside the makeshift paddock, arms crossed, a cup of black coffee cooling in his hand. He hadn't slept more than a few hours, but he didn't feel tired. Not in the way he used to, not in the kind that crushed your chest and made you forget why you were still standing. Ash was still there. That's all that mattered. The stallion stood with one leg wrapped and stitched, ribs showing but eyes bright. Every morning, Beckett expected him to bolt. He never did. He just stood in the clearing, watching, waiting. Lena walked up beside him, her ranger badge freshly polished, hair tied back in a loose braid. "You know," she said quietly, "most horses would have disappeared into the trees the moment they could stand." Beckett didn't look at her. "He's not most horses." She nodded, a soft smile forming. "Neither are you." A week had passed since the raid. Wexley was in federal custody. So were 4 others from the Department of Natural Resources, along with 2 executives from Sable Creek Mining Corp. The press had gotten wind of it all. Illegal drilling operations, weapons trafficking, conspiracy to murder federal officers. It was messy, scandalous, and now public. Lena handed Beckett a manila envelope. Commendation came through, Medal of Valor, for both of us. He opened the flap. Inside were 2 documents and a small silver medallion engraved with the seal of the U.S. Forest Service. They also sent one more, she added, pulling out a certificate from her satchel. It was custom-made, not official. Ash, recognized for acts of bravery, loyalty, and service in defense of life. Beckett stared at it for a long moment, then laughed quietly. They gave a medal to a Mustang. "He earned it," Lena said. Beckett took a deep breath and stepped through the gate. Ash turned his head, ears flicking forward. "You ready?" Beckett asked. Ash didn't move. Beckett unhooked the thin rope tied loosely around Ash's neck, letting it fall to the dirt. The horse stayed rooted. "If you stay," Beckett said softly, "it's not because I need you. It's because you choose to come back." Silence. Then Ash blinked, lowered his head, and took one slow step forward. And another. He walked past Beckett, through the gate and into the pasture, then stopped. Turned his head. Met Beckett's eyes. A single nod. As if to say, "I'm not done yet." 3 months later, Canyon Ridge had transformed. Where the old ranger station had burned down, a new structure was being raised. Larger, open air, solar-powered. A carved wooden sign hung proudly at the front. Ash Ridge Sanctuary Wild Hearts. Healing Souls. The sanctuary was Lena's idea, funded through grants and donations that poured in after the story went national. Not just for horses, but for veterans, too. A place where those carrying invisible wounds could find quiet, purpose, and something pure. Caleb Green had taken on the role of tracker and guide, teaching survival skills to visiting vets. Kids from nearby towns came for weekend clinics, learning how to saddle, brush, and listen. And Ash, he was everywhere. A symbol. A guardian. Beckett never said much about him in interviews. Let the others do the talking. But folks came from across the country just to see the horse that saved a ranger and stood his ground against fire and bullets. Some brought apples. Others just watched in silence, tears in their eyes. One crisp autumn morning, Beckett sat on the porch of the new lodge, a leather-bound notebook open in his lap. He'd started writing again. Stories, memories, bits of his brother's old journal, things he never thought he'd want to remember. Lena walked up, holding 2 mugs. "Black, no sugar, like a savage," she teased. He smirked, taking the cup. "Appreciate the consistency." She nodded toward the paddock. "There's a new colt out there, just wandered in this morning. Spooked, skinny as hell. But Ash didn't chase him off, just stood between him and the herd." Beckett looked up. "Sounds familiar." She shrugged. "Maybe the wild knows its own." They sat in silence for a long time, listening to the breeze through the pines, the distant sound of hooves on dirt, the quiet hum of something peaceful being rebuilt. Lena leaned over and said, Do you ever think you'd end up here? He thought about Syria, about Devil's Spine, about the fire, the pain, the silence that had once ruled his life. No, he said honestly, but I think this is where I was always supposed to be. That night, under a sky scattered with stars, Beckett walked down to the pasture alone. Ash stood beneath the moonlight, still as a statue, ears twitching toward the wind. Beckett reached out, resting a hand gently on his withers. "Still here," he whispered. Ash didn't move, didn't need to. Some things didn't need words. Some bonds didn't break. And in the quiet heart of Canyon Ridge, between the wild and the wounded, something whole had finally begun to grow again.